In the early 20th century, Europe seemed to be at the absolute peak of its power and influence. It was an era of magnificent empires, with flags of nations like Britain, France, Germany, and Russia flying over vast territories across the globe. Cities like London, Paris, and Berlin were bustling centers of culture, industry, and innovation. On the surface, it was a golden age of progress and civilization. But beneath this shimmering veneer of calm and prosperity, a complex web of rivalries, alliances, and ambitions was pulling the continent taut. Nationalism was soaring, arms races were escalating, and the great powers were eyeing each other with suspicion. The stage was being set for a conflict of unimaginable scale. Then came June 28th, 1914. In the city of Sarajevo, a single event would ignite the powder keg. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie were visiting the city. As their motorcade moved through the streets, a young nationalist named Gavrilo Princip stepped out from the crowd and fired his pistol. The Archduke and his wife were killed. It was a political assassination, a shocking act of defiance. But no one could have predicted that this one bullet, fired in a distant corner of Europe, would be the spark that sets the entire world on fire. The assassination triggered a rapid chain reaction. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia couldn't meet all the demands, declarations of war began to fly. A tangled system of defensive alliances designed to keep the peace did the exact opposite. Russia mobilized to protect Serbia, which brought Germany into the conflict against Russia. Then France, allied with Russia, was drawn in. When Germany invaded neutral Belgium to attack France, Great Britain declared war. Within weeks, the dominoes had fallen, and the great powers of Europe were locked in a death struggle. The Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary, faced the Allied powers, which included France, Britain, and Russia. Nations fell into chaos, and the world was plunged into a conflict unlike any it had ever known. What followed was 4 years of hell on Earth, defined by the brutal reality of trench warfare. On the Western Front, millions of soldiers dug into a vast network of muddy, rat-infested ditches that stretched for hundreds of miles. Life in the trenches was a relentless nightmare of misery. Soldiers faced constant shelling, sniper fire, and the terrifying prospect of going over the top into a hail of machine gun fire. The battlefield became a barren wasteland of mud, barbed wire, and death. This war also saw the terrifying advancement of military technology. Poison gas choked the lungs of unsuspecting soldiers. Massive artillery bombardments turned landscapes into moonscapes, and the first tanks lumbered across no man's land. It was a horrifying paradox. As the technology of killing advanced, humanity itself seemed to regress into a state of primitive brutality. This was not just a European war, it was a global war. The great empires called upon their colonies for support, and soldiers from every corner of the world were drawn into the fight. Over 70 million military personnel were mobilized. Men from Africa, India, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand fought and died in the fields of France and the deserts of the Middle East. Fleets battled on the high seas, and new aerial combatants, fighter pilots, dueled in the skies. The war's impact reached far beyond the battlefields, as entire societies were mobilized for the war effort. Civilians faced rationing, propaganda, and the constant fear of losing loved ones. From the fields of Africa to the shores of Asia, the conflict consumed the entire world. By 1918, the relentless strain of total war had pushed the old empires to their breaking point. Revolution erupted in Russia, toppling the Tsar and leading to the rise of the Bolsheviks. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, a patchwork of different ethnicities, fractured and collapsed. The Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, finally crumbled after centuries of decline. And in Germany, defeat on the battlefield led to political turmoil and the abdication of the Kaiser. In just 4 short years, 4 great ancient empires had vanished from the map. The political geography of Europe was redrawn, and the world would never be the same again. Finally, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the guns on the Western Front fell silent. The Armistice was signed, and an eerie quiet descended over the battlefields. soldiers emerged from their trenches, some celebrating, others simply numb with exhaustion and grief. But the peace that followed was deeply flawed. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, placed the full blame for the war on Germany and imposed crippling reparations and territorial losses. Instead of fostering reconciliation, this victor's peace sowed the seeds of resentment and anger in the hearts of the German people, creating a fertile ground for extremism that would tragically ignite again just 2 decades later, in 1939. The devastation of the Great War created a vacuum of power and a crisis of spirit across Europe. In the ashes of defeat and economic depression, new, monstrous ideologies began to rise. In Italy, Benito Mussolini and his fascists promised to restore national pride. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party exploited the public's anger and desperation, weaving a narrative of betrayal and revenge. The very war that was supposed to end all wars had utterly failed its promise. It had instead created the perfect conditions for an even more catastrophic conflict to emerge from its shadows. Today, the Great War is a memory, but its scars remain etched on the landscape and in our collective consciousness. Memorials stand in silent tribute. Poppy fields grow where battles once raged, and the names of the fallen are carved into stone in towns and villages across the world. Its echo serves as a powerful and somber reminder that peace is a fragile treasure, easily lost, and that the freedom we often take for granted has been paid for at an immense price. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more history that has shaped our world.